They identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections. Since Democrat states refuse to share their voter files, the real number is actually much higher than that.
President Trump finally delivered his big election fraud speech, and I have some questions. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, your home for independent and nonpartisan analysis and commentary on news, politics, media, internet insanity, and more. We're going to start out today by taking a look at the big speech President Trump delivered last night, Thursday night. And I did listen to the whole thing. It started out with kind of just typical partisan talking points about the economy and other things. But then he eventually did get into the substance that was much hyped because President Trump has claimed for years that the 2020 election was stolen from him, alleging very explicit voter fraud and rigging of an election. Not just that it was unfair or some of the rules were, expanded in inappropriate ways during the pandemic. He's very explicit. Stolen election has been his claim, and that's never been substantiated with real evidence. It's lost every single time in court that it was argued. And this was supposed to be him coming out with the receipts. Now that he's president again, and now that he's in charge of the intelligence agencies, they're going to dig through the documents and they're going to drop us all the proof that was, they always told us was coming. And what did we actually get? Well, we're going to go through it. But first, I'll say that two things can be true at the same time. One, that he did unveil some potentially concerning and important stuff, but two, that it doesn't in any way even allege, let alone prove, that the 2020 election was stolen. Anyway, let's look at this first clip where President Trump outlines his concerns about China and the Chinese Communist Party as a hostile regime, supposedly obtaining millions of people's voter data. Let's watch.
Tonight, I'm announcing the immediate declassification and release of critical intelligence revealing shocking vulnerabilities in our election infrastructure. First, they show that over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening.
So the big reveal there is that he alleges more than 200 million people's voter data was illicitly obtained by China. And obviously that is a big allegation and not a good development, but it's also not an allegation of voter fraud. Obtaining people's voter information isn't the same thing as sending fake ballots, changing vote tallies, or doing anything to directly change the result of an election. So right there, it's worth pointing out that his first big bombshell allegation is not in any way a substantiation of a stolen election. It's still a very concerning possibility that we should take seriously and discuss, but it's not that. And that's very important to establish. And then the more that you kind of look into this or think about it, kind of the less of a bombshell it seems to be, because as it turns out, most voter registration data is already essentially publicly available and is bought and sold even. You can, in many states, you can get public voter files with almost all the information he just mentioned for paying a small fee to the Secretary of State. Frankly, corporations have been able to buy a lot of this data online. People's voter registration information isn't, in fact, a very well-kept or well-guarded secret. So I'll read you a couple tweets. One from the journalist Kyle Clark. Among the documents released by the White House tonight is this claim that Colorado's voter registration rolls were compromised by China. Colorado's voter registration rolls are public records. You can order a copy here. Then he links to the Secretary of State. Congressman Thomas Massie, a Republican, also tweeted of this statement, "This is absurd. Every piece of voter data Trump mentions here, as well as which elections each voter voted in, is readily available in Kentucky for a small fee." Eric Erickson, the conservative radio host and commentator, he wrote on X, "Hello all, the 220 million voter files China hacked are readily available for you too to get your hands on from the various secretaries of state. Some commercial firms sell them too with more information in them." So I guess the big point to make and understand about Trump's allegation is that it doesn't actually allege manipulation of election results. And then to the extent that China obtained this data, that's warrants, investigation into what they were doing with it, how did they obtain it. But it's not exactly sensitive state secrets we're talking about either. And Trump did not allege that China actually did anything, or that they have evidence that China did anything with all that 200 million plus voter file data. So actually, this was really interesting to me. But the MAGA journalist turned Trump advisor, John Solomon, who Trump has really heaped praise on in the past for his coverage of these issues, was asked about this immediately after the speech. And here's what he acknowledged. Listen to this.
We're not telling the president.
Did you acknowledge that there were no votes changed in 2020?
All I can acknowledge is what the intelligence shows, right? I only know the intelligence community has zero evidence that someone has that a foreign power flipped a vote in 2020, 22, or 24.
Well, there you go, folks. His own advisor is saying that even after all this big reveal and they've gone through all the intelligence and everything, they have zero evidence a foreign power flipped a vote. So everything you hear about China should be viewed in that context of its possible very real and legitimate concerns about foreign election interference, but potentially. But they're not even alleging that actually happened. So this does nothing to substantiate Trump's years-long insistence that the 2020 election was stolen. Now, here is something from the documents he released, from internal intelligence community documents that he just declassified. They, quote, assess that vote tabulation systems would be difficult to manipulate on a wide enough scale to compromise election results. The system in each voting location are not connected to the internet. And then here's what the journalist Ike Saul of Tangled News, who has covered this stuff for years, wrote on X. "I know very few people are going to actually download and read these things," referring to the documents Trump just released. But just to be clear, Trump is not even alleging that any election tallies were impacted, just that our systems are vulnerable to foreign interference, which Democrats and Republicans have both been warning about for decades. So, I mean, to say that these revelations from Trump are insignificant or not at all concerning would be wrong. But to suggest that they in any way vindicate or justify the years-long election conspiracies and insistence he secretly won is also just totally not correct or true. And that's very important to note. Now let's listen to Trump's second claim, where he references a potential actual attempt by China to manipulate election outcomes. Let's watch.
But it gets even worse. Raw intelligence obtained by the FBI in 2020, yet buried by rogue bureaucrats, stated that China's activities even included an attempt to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden.
So the interesting thing about this is that it comes from raw intelligence, which is essentially just a tip, right? Or it's just a preliminary allegation of something. And when you look at the actual document, there are some mistakes in it. So, for example, it references China getting people's addresses from TikTok, from TikTok data, which would actually be a huge revelation for other reasons. But TikTok doesn't actually store people's addresses or have their addresses in many cases. So it just doesn't even make sense. And then this tip was followed through on and investigated, and they never actually found that China did it. Elsewhere in these same release documents, they make clear that they never observed an actual effort to manipulate vote tallies by China. So it's concerning and should be investigated that China may have considered such a thing, but to reference a preliminary raw intelligence asserting something in a kind of flawed way that then you never actually observed or found them to have done it isn't really a bombshell or a smoking gun. There's raw intelligence saying all sorts of things. But until you actually investigate it and conclude it to be credible and find proof, it doesn't actually tell you whether or not the thing happened. We saw this with the Epstein files, where a lot of like Democrats or progressives would take things out of the Epstein files that have some horrendous accusation about Trump. And they're like, look, it's in FBI intelligence. And it's like, it's just raw intelligence. It's just people alleging stuff. And then sometimes it's looked into and it's totally wrong, or it's not true at all. The person is schizophrenic or what have you. So it's like, that is not a smoking gun. And elsewhere, they repeatedly say they didn't actually see any attempt by China to change vote counts, which is what this would be, right? If you were sending in fake mail-in ballots. So again, it's kind of just not really the as big a deal as they're making it out to be. One final portion I want to highlight is where Trump suggests that they found hundreds of thousands of non-citizens on the voter rolls. Let's listen to that.
According to the DHS review, state voter rolls and public records, they identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections. Since Democrat states refuse to share their voter files, the real number is actually much higher than that. Yet, even this limited analysis found more than 250,000 foreigners illegally registered to vote. Put together, these disclosures reveal an election system so broken and so vulnerable that no one can possibly defend it. It is not defensible.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that last part, that it's totally indefensible, but I would certainly acknowledge that there's a lot that could be improved, and I'm open to that conversation. But that doesn't mean that the system is totally compromised. And what's interesting is the actual document he is referring to here from the Homeland Security DHS actually alleges something kind of different. So it says over 250,000 non-citizens are illegally registered to vote in just the 4 states for which public data files have been reviewed. But this is using a system to check this that is subject to a lot of false positives because it often flags naturalized citizens as non-citizens, so people who've just recently become citizens. But regardless, even at face value, the actual numbers, just a couple paragraphs down, what this document actually says is that, quote, as of June 22nd, 2026, a total of 25 different states processed more than 68 million registration records through the SaveAct system. DHS has enabled those states to identify over 400,000 deceased registrants and over 28,000 non-citizens who illegally registered to vote. So, out of the deceased residents are just people who've died and who need to be removed from the rolls. But yes, these systems are bureaucratic and slow, and so they often don't remove people. They should, but that's not proof of like mass voter fraud. And this is only, guys, who is registered to vote. This isn't about who actually votes. So their own document he's basing this claim off says that out of 68 million registration records, they found 28,000 non-citizens who were registered to vote. How many actually voted? Half? A third? A fifth? Because frankly, only a small percentage of registered voters actually vote. And who did they vote for? Some of them might have voted for Trump. So it's like, that's not an insanely big number, in fact. It's certainly nowhere near proof that the 2020 election was rigged. Now, sure, should we take more steps to clean the voter rolls and make sure they're up to date and they're accurate? Absolutely. But you can only really consider this stuff in the context of the extraordinary claims that Trump has made. And then this is supposed to be the extraordinary evidence? It's not. I'm not saying it's inconsequential. I'm saying it doesn't even get close to proving the burden that he set for himself with his own statements and repeated years-long campaign on all of this stuff. Now, there were other parts of this that were interesting as well, this speech last night. For example, Trump went after media outlets really hard for choosing to not carry the speech live. And I have mixed feelings on that because on one hand, I actually do believe these networks should carry the speech live. If the president of the United States is giving a speech about something very important and going to make some bombshell allegations, then it's, in my view, not the job of elite media executives to say, oh, no, we got to shield the poor people's eyes from this because he's going to say misinformation. No, you should do what, for example, CBS News did, which was air the speech, but kind of explain to people beforehand that, listen, he's got a history of making very false and inaccurate claims about this kind of thing. And then after and during, you can do fact checks, you can bring in dissenting perspectives, and you can litigate it all. I don't think you should do what some of these networks did. For example, on cable, CNN chose to do this, and just not show the speech. I don't agree with that, though they do have the right to do it. Now, Trump went after specifically a couple of the broadcast networks who have FCC licenses, and he attacked them for this, for daring to not show the speech. And it's like, and he even suggested their licenses should be revoked. And while I disagree, so I think he was referring to ABC and NBC, which both live streamed it and had it available to people, but just didn't broadcast it on their main broadcast. They then covered parts of it and discussed it and did whatever. And he's suggesting their licenses should be revoked for that. That's insane. Like, you don't get to, whether you or I think they should have covered it, you don't get to revoke their licenses because they're making coverage decisions you don't like. That's totally at odds with the First Amendment. Obviously, they were not entitled to a license, but you can't revoke it because you don't like their viewpoint or their editorial choices. And regardless, it's not like anyone who wanted to watch the speech couldn't see it. It just comes off again as him lashing out at the media in a kind of unhinged way. The whole speech, I mean, like I said, I'm not discounting out of hand everything that was alleged, but it's just still not delivering the goods that we've been waiting on for years, the smoking guns that he's promised have been there this whole time. It's like, this is the best you came up with? A bunch of allegations that don't even at face value substantiate your years-long campaign about this? I don't know, man. It's wild to me because, like, this does nothing to address anything going on. People are concerned about gas prices. People are concerned about the war, the economy. He did the thing in the speech where he brags about how amazing the economy is doing. And I'm like, I don't know, man. That's not what most people are experiencing or thinking. So that comes off a little tone deaf, like when Biden used to do that. And regardless, I'm just like, everyone is so over this, relitigating this ancient election stuff. And Trump just cannot let it go because he is blinded by his narcissism. And he really should just focus on actually fixing the situation now. Because I'll tell you right now, they are on course to get a shellacking in the midterms and to have a Democratic House and maybe even a Democratic Senate. And it will not be because of voter fraud. It will be because of massive momentum against Trump and disapproval for the Republicans and the way they're handling stuff right now that's affecting people's pocketbooks and their lives. And relitigating stuff with, misleading claims about China from 2020 is just that's not going to appeal to most people, I don't believe, at least. But that's just my take. You guys can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you aren't yet. And do consider becoming a channel member if you support my independent-minded commentary and analysis, bringing you things from kind of a nonpartisan perspective. Unfortunately, doing political YouTube, the best business model is to just pander to one side, and then you can get millions of subscribers and make millions of dollars. But I don't do that. And so I do need support from viewers like you. Hit the join button or click the link in the pinned comment. And with that, guys, we'll leave it there for now and be back with more real soon.